Hey, all, welcome back to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. I'm Darren, I'm your host, and today we got a couple of special guests who have been on before, Lloyd Cappuccio and Kevin Liddell. And today we're going to talk about aged meat, how to do it, why we do it, and all that. I'll be right back with Kevin and Lloyd, and we're going to talk about aged meat.
Smoking, grilling, getting hot and hotter, sous vide and chilling from fire and water.
Hey, all, I want to welcome back Inkbird Products as a sponsor of the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. Inkbird makes many great different temperature controllers, thermometers, all kinds of time and temp controllers. But one of the best things that they make is their new sous vide circulator that includes Wi-Fi, 1,000 watts of power, and super quiet at a really affordable price. It's one of my top picks for a budget sous vide circulator for people who are just getting started. Make sure you check it out in the link below. Check out Inkbird. Welcome back, Inkbird Products, to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. Welcome back to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. I'm Darren, I'm your host, of course, and today I'm welcoming back a couple guests that have been on before and a couple of my buddies that we like to talk about things that probably most of you guys don't talk about on your own. It's Kevin Liddell and Lloyd Cappuccio. They are my friends from the Sous Vide Summit. We kind of kick around on the sous vide groups and talk about a lot of stuff. So welcome back, Kevin. Welcome back, Lloyd.
Thank you.
And Lloyd, let's talk about you again.
Thanks.
Who are you?
Let's see. I'm a 55.
Kosher dosher.
Yeah,
You are the kosher.
I'm the kosher dosher. Been retired a couple of years from air traffic control. I'm a foodie at heart. Been cooking since I'm like 10, 11 years old and never stopped.
And Kevin, who are you?
Yeah, I'm from northern central Pennsylvania. I've been cooking professionally for 25 plus years. And I've been into sous vide for a few years and having fun with it. And I'm also a professional fly fishing guide and fly catching instructor.
Wow. I'm none of those. And y'all know me. I just like to cook and eat and play around with sous vide and barbecue and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to talk about today something a little different. We're not going to talk about sous vide or barbecue, but with this, you can sous vide it and barbecue it. And we're going to talk about aging meat, not just beef, but all kinds of meat. We're going to start out with beef. Let's just talk about the aging process and why it gets done. I know that there's a lot of people out there that if they've been to a high-end steakhouse restaurant, they always hear the buzzword, dry aged beef, and probably a lot of them don't understand what it is or what it does or why it's good or why it's bad. But I also want to talk about the other aging, which is wet aging, which people probably eat more of that than they even know about. So, and of course, we'll talk about some other things as well, some of the other weird things that are out there, some gimmicky stuff that's been going on. And we're going to talk about things that maybe people didn't realize, you could dry age. So, but let's talk about beef first. And Lloyd, I know you've done some experiments.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
with because I want to talk about not just regular aging or wet aging, dry aging, but I want to talk about faux aging, which I know you've done some of that stuff. So
we're talking the fish sauce,
right?
Specifically, right?
So let's start out with you, Lloyd, because you got all that meat behind you and your avatar there. So,
oh yeah.
What
I started getting into?
Well, let's talk about why aging is important, even wet aging or dry aging, what actually it does. And if you want to start with just wet aging, we can do that and just talk about why is
you want to go from like wet, dry to faux?
Yeah, we could do that. I mean,
okay.
Or just talk on why do we age meat in the first place?
Tenderization and flavor, intense beef flavor. That's why I do it.
Now, I know I'm actually getting ready to have a whole cow processed, and it'll probably be ready sometime middle of next month. So I know like the first few days, the reason you're aging it, you don't just slaughter it that day and then cut it up and start eating it. And it's because of rigor. So but most of the time, if you buy meat in a store, it's been at least hung after it's slaughtered for at least a week or so, right?
I've heard between a week and 30 days. And Costco, um, although you're buying prime sometimes, they're slaughtered, and within 2 to 3 days, they're in packages and they're put on the shelves. That's why they do a lot of jacquard mechanical tenderization, because they know their meat's not tender.
Right. Yeah, and I've
So,
heard the same thing too. And
mhm.
people have asked this in the forums a lot because, when they go to Costco and they buy these beautiful looking ribeye steaks and it's got that big warning label on there, cook them to 165 degrees. People go, "What? I don't want to eat a well done steak." And it is because they don't hang the beef for long at all. They hang it just enough for the rigor to be gone, and then they package it up and ship it out. And that's one of the things I do when I buy any kind of meat from Costco. I don't buy the cut steaks. I'll buy the primals, the subprimals,
In the cryovac.
and the cryovac, and I'll
Yep.
stick them in my outside refrigerator for at least a week before I even cut into them and start making steaks out of them. So let's talk about wet aging since you brought
I
that
thought I
up.
was the only one that did that too.
No, I do that all the time. And let's talk about what wet aging is, because a lot of people probably they've heard dry aging all the time, because actually, back in the old days, that's all they did is dry age. Everything was dry aged. Everything was hung, for weeks or months at a
Yeah.
time, before we got into this big commodity, boxed beef stuff. Now we have wet aging. So let's talk about that, Kevin. What's wet aging?
What it is basically taking cuts of meat and put them in a plastic bag and vacuum sealing them. Uh, and what it does is it has the same sort of enzymatic reactions that you get in dry aging, but you don't get the moisture loss. So it does tenderize it, but it doesn't increase or intensify the flavor by reducing the amount of moisture. Water doesn't have any flavor, so the less water you have in the product, the more you're going to taste the product. Um, so while it's in a bag, it's not going to lose any moisture. You'll find that some myoglobin will come out while they're in the bag, um, but you don't get a lot of the reactions within an environment, because it's in its own environment. So there's no reaction like it would have in a dry aging room and that sort of thing. So wet aging is definitely beneficial, but it doesn't have the qualities that people look for when they do dry aging.
Now I've heard, and I've never really experienced, but because I guess I've never had gone very long when I do wet age. I do it a week or two. I don't do it much longer than that. Even if I have it in there, I'll take it out, process it, cut it up into steaks, then vacuum seal it and freeze it, before I won't let it sit there for 30 or 40 days, which from what I hear with wet aging, it'll get more of a metallic-y type taste to it because the myoglobin is still in there and it's affecting the taste of the meat that way. Have you heard that too, Lloyd?
I have. And also the downside to wet aging, not that there's a downside, um, you're not getting the good bacteria I think it's called thandium, to multiply on the outside, that penetrates into the meat to give you that funk flavor, that kind of aged cheese flavor you get with dry aged meat. So wet aging makes it more tender, but there's no funk taste. There's no intensity, in my opinion, because it doesn't undergo any kind of moisture loss.
So for wet aging, though, people can do that pretty easy. They can just buy
Mhm.
a subprimal at Costco or the grocery store, the big, the full ribeye or the, big chunk of sirloin. Usually any kind of, like even a prime rib roast, they could actually just leave it in the cryo pack and let it sit in the refrigerator for a week or so, and they can wet age on their own pretty easy. Now, when it comes to dry aging, people get a little scared, and they're really not as familiar with it. They've heard the term and they'll eat it at a restaurant, but they're, as far as telling people they can do it at home, they're kind of scared. But there are some ways you can do that now that we'll kind of talk about. But since you touched on it, the difference between wet aging and dry aging actually will release some of the moisture from the meat, which affects the flavors. What are some of the things that affect the flavors besides just the mold and stuff? What makes it the taste difference so much different than wet age. So, Kevin, you go ahead. Are you there?
Well, actually, a big part of it are the molds and the yeasts. Um, there are two major molds that you get that add quite a bit of flavor to dry aged meat. Penicillium nalgiovense is the like a white powder you'll sometimes find on the outside of dry aged meat. If you think about like salamis, dried salamis, they have that white powder all on the outside of them. That's the mold Penicillium nalgiovense. Another one, Lloyd was talking about you get sort of the funky blue cheese smell people talk about, and it gets greater as the
Fandium.
steak as the age gets older, and that's created by Penicillium roqueforti, which is the mold that's responsible for blue cheese. It's the exact same mold, and that's why you get that blue cheese flavor. There's a scientific basis for why you get that blue
Yeah,
cheese
and that's
flavor.
why it's called Roquefort some places. Roquefort is the
Yes,
yeah.
Italian blue cheese. And then there's a yeast that's common called Saccharomyces cerevisiae, and that's used quite often in brewing beer, and that gives a bit of flavor to it as well.
It's basically the mold on
Um,
the outside.
part of
It's one of them.
bacteria. Some
You're,
say it's controlled spoilage.
yeah, you're kind of breaking up a little bit,
In my
Kevin. So,
bad internet.
yeah, that's all right. We'll get back to you,
All
but we're
right.
going to talk about a little bit too. Now, how much effect on the flavor does the losing of the moisture and concentrating of the flavors that are already in there have to do with it, Lloyd?
It intensifies the flavor. It's like I can talk about, let's say, chicken. Everybody's brine chicken, correct? Poultry,
Mm-hmm.
Thanksgiving. And you contrast that, let's say, with dry brining. Well, with wet brining, you actually kind of dilute the flavor. So it appears more moist, but you're eating it, but you get that diluted chicken flavor or poultry flavor. Whereas when you dry brine, you actually lose some moisture and intensifies the flavor. It's the same thing with beef. Beef is very, very wet, very lot of moisture. If you lose a percentage of the moisture content, it intensifies that beef flavor. And that's what I want. So that's why I
Yeah.
prefer dry age over wet aging. But not everybody has dry aged meat.
Right. And I know another thing too with dry aging, since we're talking about the molds and stuff that create that added flavor, more of a nutty or blue cheesy type flavor, the longer you go, the more intense that gets. So there's some people that will, you know, eat a 30-day dry age steak, but you give them a 60-day dry age steak and it's just like, ugh, they just don't like it. I mean, it's just like, it's a personal preference thing. It's not bad. I mean, it's just like anything. It's like some people like blue cheese, some people like Swiss cheese. So the longer you go, and I've seen some of these crazy, long, extensive times. People have done dry age. I mean, I think I saw one that was almost a 2-year dry age. It was crazy, and they did a full and something like that. You got to do a really big piece of meat because another thing with dry aging, you lose a lot of moisture, which means you lose a lot of the meat. So if you start out with a 30-pound hunk of meat, and if you're going to dry age it for 60 to 70 days, you're losing up to 20% of the moisture. And the longer you go, the more moisture you're losing and the smaller it gets. But I've seen some crazy, 200 day, 300 day, 400 day dry age things. And it's just, to what point does it not make a difference, or it gets to a point where you just can't eat it?
I've seen 500
How long, Kevin?
day dry age.
500 day?
500 days.
Wow. Did you
Yeah.
taste it, or did you see a video, or?
I saw a video. Yeah, I've never seen it for sale anywhere.
I saw a video where they had a 500 plus. There was a 796 day. It was something really crazy number, and they had to slice it on a slicing machine. It was like eating not beef jerky, but it was like eating a salami.
Yeah.
Because the moisture content had been so much.
And I haven't watched it yet, but I know that new Netflix special, the Chef's Table Barbecue, there's a chef in there that I think one of the things that he serves is a 200-day dry aged, but he doesn't totally dry age it. And this is one of the things I want to talk about. is that there's these other methods of aging that you see out on the internet now. And I know that there's some videos out there and I've seen it and I'm trying to debunk it. I've got Meathead and Dr. Blonder working on it, if there's any kind of science behind it, but it's these people that they age it in butter or beef fat, where they'll take a steak or a primal and instead of just keeping it in the cryovac the way they wet age it, or dry age it, they actually dip it in butter or beef fat and coat it in that fat and let it age. And for some reason, they think that does something that you can't get with wet aged or dry aged. So I'm still trying to figure out what the science could be, because as far as I know, the butter and the beef fat aren't going to do anything as far as adding anything to the beef that's already there.
Would that be similar to like wet aging, meaning that there's no moisture loss because it's locking in the moisture?
That's
There's
what
no moisture loss.
Yeah, there's no moisture loss, and that's
I don't know.
to me all it can be doing is being
Exactly.
being a wet aged, and I don't know if you'd get any kind of different result.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to do a video when I have this whole cow processed. I'm going to do some different kind of experiments, and I think that's one of the things I'm going to do. I'm going to do a regular wet aged, compare it to a butter age, like just a 30-day, just to see. But from what I understand in that Netflix video, he actually dry ages it for like the first 30 days and then coats it in fat and then, ages it the rest of the way in the fat. So do you think there's a benefit? And that would be like, semi dry aging and then wet aging it the rest of the way. Do you think
it's from what I read, at the 28-day mark, you reach maximum tenderization. It will not get any more tender beyond 28 days. However, the additional funk and moisture loss will have a significant change. So if he's aging it for 28, 30 days, he's achieved all the tenderization he's going to get. And beyond that, I don't know.
So that's what I'm trying to understand, what the benefit would be if you're not
There's no
developing
funk.
those. Yeah, there's no mold or
No.
moisture loss to concentrate the flavor. So I'm trying to understand what, and there may be some moisture loss, but just not as, and maybe it's a smaller percentage than you would get when you dry age it. So I'm trying to, that's what I thought. I think I'm going to have, Meathead and Dr. Blonder kind of do some tests and try to put some science to it, because to me, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And I think a lot of people do things like this just because it looks cool, and I think
You're just wasting good fat and butter.
yeah. When I saw that thing with the butter, and this was a couple of years ago when I first saw it, it was a viral video, and it's like, it makes absolutely no sense to me, but it's that wow factor that people are going for, I guess. And people do things for sometimes just to look cool, and you really can't explain it because I've never seen any science. I've tried to find any kind of what it actually would do any different than wet or dry aging, and there's nothing out there that I could see. So since Kevin's locked up again, hopefully he can come back here in a minute. But so there are other ways to dry age, and since, like I said, a lot of people are starting to try this at home now, and I'm going to share my screen because there's a couple ways that people can dry age. Like I said, wet aging, you don't really need any kind of special equipment. You can just pretty much put it in your your own refrigerator in the cryo pack.
There we go. Nice.
There you go. Okay. So, and I have these actually. I have some because I just had the lady contact me from My Dry, and she sent me some bags, and that's what I'm going to use when I get this steer. I'm going to take a couple of the subprimals and do some of my own dry aging. But they make these bags, which are a membrane, which supposedly allows moisture to exit the bag, but not have anything come into the bag. Have you done any of these kind of use these bags at all, Lloyd?
So I first did it 7 or 8 years ago, and since then I've done it several more times with very, very good results. I found that unless you're doing prime, the results aren't that great. You get the mahogany glaze on the outside, but you're not getting that super funk that you would get if it was open to the air. The way the bags work, they'll let moisture escape. It'll prevent the bad microbial bacteria to grow on the inside. Requires good circulation in your refrigerator. So put it on a trivet. And what's really cool about the bags is that they'll maintain about a 60% humidity, which is required for dry aged meats. They're really good. And I've also used the bags for, charcuterie, whole salami, curing, sausages. I've used these bags a lot.
Yeah, they make several different kinds, and
They do.
I actually did some last year where I actually did a top sirloin, and I did a brisket actually that I did a 45-day brisket. I dry aged a whole packer brisket.
How was
Uh,
it?
it was good. The only problem, I did it for 45 days, and I picked a brisket that had a pretty thin flat section. So I lost a good portion of the flat just from it being, dried out and not really usable. But it turned out really well. I liked the fact that it was pretty easy, and I had a garage fridge I could stick it in, and I did I used a rack with put it on a pan and a rack, so it actually worked pretty well. I mean, I had no issues, but like you said, you don't get that
The
and
funk.
you don't the funk, and you don't have to worry about a whole lot of bad stuff, because if you have other things in your refrigerator and then they're in the open air, a lot of the stuff can affect the flavors. And that's one of the things, I was watching a couple of videos on some of these big companies that's all they do is dry age, and they have these big huge rooms with thousands and thousands of hunks of meat of dry age, and that's what they want, that mold and funk that's in there to affect the meat, because they put more meat in there every day, and they are using that funk and mold and the yeasts that are in the air to flavor the meat. So they do a little, that's their big thing with that, and that's what you don't get with these bags, because you're strictly with this. You're looking for that concentration of the flavors and the tenderization.
Those
Uh,
those those big companies that do tons of beef create their own climate,
right.
and each one of those, they have their steak's going to be different than someone else's who has a different kind of microclimate. Um, and when you have like the umami bags and these small home devices, small refrigerators with humidity control, like the steak ager, you don't get you have a microclimate, and you're not gonna be able to reproduce what these big companies can actually produce.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things I got from that, is that you can have a dry aged steak in one restaurant, and then they buy it from one purveyor. You go to a different restaurant and they buy it from a separate purveyor that dries a totally different way or different room, and it could be the same time frame and it just tastes totally different.
Different technique too with the moisture level. You can control the humidity and the temperature, and you can get a different product.
So there's also these things that Kevin kind of touched on it. The steak ager, where you can buy these little um, refrigerators in different sizes, where you can actually they you can put them in there on their own without any kind of special bag or anything. And I think there's another one that's a higher end one called a steak locker. I've seen this at one of the barbecue restaurant or barbecue stores that I deal with that sells a lot of high end stuff. They're starting to carry these, and this is their lower line model of the $1,000 model, and they've actually got some that are a lot more expensive than this. So you can buy. Let's just see. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
there's a
the.
German company that makes some real expensive ones, about 5 or 6 grand for a home unit.
Yeah, let's see what this
Wow.
the pro one here is, like 4 grand. So, and they're strictly designed for hanging meat, being able to control the moisture, the fans, circulate it just right. So there is, you know, these little steak agers, these are cheaper. And I don't know, I think Kingsford actually used to own this company and they spun it off, or somebody else bought it off. But you can buy these things, and let's see
There's
how
some
much.
history there. Steak Asia was their own company.
But
Kingsford took over, and then something happened.
Yeah. Okay, so this one's like their
they
medium
they, they
size.
developed a product that was terrible.
Oh yeah.
Kingsford did, right?
I had it. Yeah, I got a Kingsford steak ager. I got like 45% off, so I thought, what the heck? So I got their top line model, and they started having such issues, and I didn't get it for months. And when I got it, it was all beat to crap. The box was ripped
Oh
open.
gosh.
I just sent it back. I never even opened it. I just sent it back. Said, "Give me my money back."
So is
And they
this
went out of business.
so
They went out
Kev,
of business.
different?
Sorry, you broke up. My
Is this
internet.
company different then, or did he? Uh, that's okay. So the
Yes.
steak agent
Notice.
break off from Kingsford?
Yeah. Notice there's no Kingsford on the front door of these things. Kingsford's not involved. They
Okay,
had a bad experience.
because it was Steak Ager. Then it went from Steak Ager to Kingsford. Now it's back to Steak Ager. Gotcha.
This is the second owner. This is pretty much a new company, and I've heard people are having good results with these.
Okay.
Yeah, so their bottom of the line, their Pro 20 model here, I guess, is 750. They got a smaller one. Looks like a microwave. It's 250, $260. So if you wanted to play around with it, I guess you could get one of these smaller models, and
My
you know,
suggestion to I had the original Steak Ager, the really really tiny one for $200 out of curiosity. I didn't have great results, but one of the things I've noticed with size. So for your viewers, if you buy one, look at the internal dimensions and decide what kind of primal you're going to buy, because you get better results with large primals. If don't buy something small.
yeah, and that's me too. I've always heard, and a lot of it is to do with how much moisture you're going to lose. You want to buy something that has a lot of heft to it, because you'll have to cut off a lot, and you're going to lose some with moisture.
Which
Um,
is why we don't do steaks. You
right.
can't buy a steak, yeah.
Yeah, because you're going to lose too much. And so if you're interested in dry aging, I would start out. I always tell people, try the Umai dry bags, because
Hmm.
they're easy. You don't need special equipment or anything. There's people that will take a regular refrigerator and, stick a humidifier in there and, fans, different fans, and turn it into their own steak ager. I mean, they'll buy extra equipment and things, so you don't really have to buy one of those. You can actually do it. There's lots of information online on how to do it, but
With
you
great
know,
success. These people,
yeah,
For the same price, you can build your.
the downside to building your own, there's only one downside. If you keep it in your garage where there's a lot of temperature fluctuations, okay, people have a hard time maintaining their humidity. So they end up buying a dehumidifier. They're trying to control that perfect environment. You have multiple fans going on. So if you can bring it inside your house. Wife would probably get pissed off at you with all that meat smell. I know mine would. If you could bring it inside your house where there's a constant ambient temperature, you're better off, and not putting it in your garage unless your garage is heated and has it's insulated.
yeah. So yeah, I always, like I said, I tell people, try it, buy these in my bags. They're $30. I think you get, they're
Yeah.
like $10 for a bag. They get three. You can get different sizes. So if you get like a bone-in primal, there's a different size than a bone-out primal, and then there's some that'll fit a brisket. Or, like I said, I did a top sirloin that I bought at Costco, and it was a choice, and it actually turned out pretty good. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the more fat content, it'll be better, because the way the fat kind of will flavor the meat more when it starts that deterioration. But I had a pretty good for a choice sirloin. It actually worked out pretty well. The only and there's different ways to trim it too. I found with like something like that, if I'm cutting it into steaks, I don't trim it until I cut the steaks individually first, and then I trim the steaks. How have you ever done it, Lloyd? Have you just trimmed
Same
the
way.
whole? Yeah.
Same, identical to you. But I just read something probably 20 minutes before we went on live, and it says that if you have a primal and you cut it into steaks, vacuum sealing afterwards is not the best idea. It goes bad pretty fast, and the funk and the tenderization changes. So some of these larger companies, I was just reading. In fact, I think Kevin or Darren, you sent me the link. They said when they get dry aged meat into their butcher shop, they just keep dry aging it until they're ready to sell it. They won't break it down or vacuum seal it at all because it changes the flavor. You have like a 2-week window to eat it. So if you are going to do it from the umami bags, plan on eating it or eating it within 2 weeks.
Gotcha. I'll have to try
No,
that. Like I said, the only ones I've done were, like I said, were the top sirloin, which I really only got maybe 10 steaks out of it, so I ate it pretty quick. And then the brisket, which I cooked all at once. That one was a hard one to trim because, especially when you had the smaller, the thinner part of the flat and all that. It was a berry because I had to really trim the whole thing before I did, because I was going to cook it whole, and so that was a pain in the butt. Kevin, go ahead. You were going to say something.
oh, a little secret about those my bags is they're actually reusable. You don't have to throw them away after you use them once.
Really? Even if there's funk in them, you wash them out.
Wash them out. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
I've
All right.
never
just
done
just
that. That's
start
good to
another.
know.
Well,
That's good to know.
let's talk about, since we spent a lot of time on that, let's talk about other meats to dry age, since beef's the number one because that's what people are used to and people do it a lot, and there's some things that the reasons why, because of the proteins and that are in beef that aren't in others. So let's talk about other types of meats, like pork and lamb and stuff. Now, I know that I did a little research and Kevin did a little research on, there's really not a whole lot out there on dry aging pork, but I do see like some higher end online sales places like Allen Brothers and a couple others that will do dry aged heritage breed pork. And Kevin, you said you found out some information on why that is.
Yeah, you kind of commodity pork can be weeks old by the time you get it. And what I found I read was that you really want pork as fresh as possible when you're going to start dry aging it. So that's why you see a lot of these heritage breeds being used, because they're butchering the animal and starting the dry age process immediately. It's not sitting around in a cryovac for 3 weeks or a month before you start dry aging it.
Now, does dry aging pork have a similar result than dry aging beef? Would you still get some of those different molds and stuff like that to create that funky stuff, or is it mostly for tenderization and consolidation of the flavors? Or
Most people doing it at home, you don't get that old. It's a little different, but apparently the flavor. I haven't tried it, but apparently flavor it does the same sort of thing. It intensifies the flavor, and people who do it, I've never seen anyone dislike it. They've all enjoyed it, and I've seen people go 40 days with pork loin.
now, do you get the same type of dried out, skin and all that, and you got to cut it off pretty much? So,
Yeah, it's softer. It's not as hard as the beef. It's easier to trim off, but you still get that, and you do have to trim it.
mhm.
So your yield's definitely less.
Have you tried any dry aged pork yourself, Lloyd? Since you're kosher,
No, I don't eat pork.
kosher pork. That's why I asked Kevin and not Lloyd, because I know he's not eating any kind of pork, whether it's dry aged or.
No, I don't eat pork.
But how about lamb? Because I don't. I just
Love
actually
lamb.
I like lamb, but I don't like imported lamb, and I think we've discussed this before. I don't like the super gamey lamb. I like
It's
domestic
hit and
lamb.
miss. It's hit and
Yeah.
miss. I was at a Brazilian restaurant. I think I texted you guys last week, and for the first time, I had lamb picanha, which comes off the rump roast with the cap. Oh my God, it was freakishly good. It was not gamey, extremely mild lamb flavor.
I wonder if
Amazing.
I wonder if it was grain finished.
I don't know. Um, Cisco provides the meat, and I don't know where they got their meat
Yeah,
from. It could be a local farm. I don't know.
yeah,
It was
because
amazing.
that's the biggest difference I've found. I've had, you know, I really stopped buying, any kind of imported lamb because I could, eat it, but my family just doesn't like it. I mean, they're just like, this is gross. It's too gamey. But I bought some from Porter Road and actually from Crowd Cow, the domestic. It's hard to find domestic lamb in your local grocery store or butcher. And it's just because, there's not a lot of farms in America that are growing lamb, that are.
Shepherd's Farm is one purveyor. Shepherd's Farm, and it's been hit and miss for me.
Yeah.
15 years ago, that's all you could get was American lamb. Now it's all Australia, New Zealand, and
Yeah.
I don't like that imported lamb either. I really don't, and it's because it's so inconsistent.
Yeah, and like I said, that's all we ever had until I got that from I said I ordered some from Crowd Cow. Just said, oh, let me try it because it's domestic, and people say domestic's different, and I was like, wow, this is so much different. It's less gamey, and it's because it's usually when it's domestic raised that they grain finish it to and it knocks down some of that gamey flavor. So
It's bigger too, Kevin. Was that your experience? The
Oh
product
yeah,
is bigger.
yes,
and I know that like up in like Kentucky or Arkansas area, barbecue they barbecue mutton a lot. I mean that's like one of their
Kentucky.
their biggest regional thing is mutton, which is older sheep. So it's not it's kind of older, but from what I understand, it's a big thing up there, and from people I know that had it, love it.
Have
I've
you
had
ever?
mutton and I enjoyed it.
Did you? Was it gamey, Kevin? Was it a real lamby flavor or?
So it's kind of hard to tell. I had it in the Caribbean, so it was curried mutton, so it kind of covers up whatever gaminess it would have.
I
But it
guess
was tasty.
possum or mutton. You probably can't tell the difference, right?
Could have been,
It's,
yeah, it could have been rat you could have eaten.
oh my God.
I got a story about that when I was in Jamaica, an all-inclusive place. They kept telling me I was eating hamburger, and it looked like goat to me, because
Or horse.
it was not the color pink that I know ground beef to be. That's for sure.
Could have been
And
horse. Could have
yeah,
been.
it was probably goat because all you saw was
Like,
goats.
yeah,
You saw goats everywhere
in
in
Jamaica,
Jamaica. Yeah, it's like goats everywhere.
At least they didn't say
So
it tastes like chicken. Tastes like
they eat a
chicken.
lot of goat. I
now
love goat though.
I've seen a lot of
I
I
do.
haven't seen a lot of dry aged lamb out there, and I've not heard about
Done
it.
it.
So
I've done it.
you've done it.
Yes.
Now, how
I,
long have you gone?
so I did the umami bags. In fact, heck, I'll even send you a link to what I did. So I made like a prosciutto, and I sliced it on my burkle, and it was amazing. And I'm trying to think. I went 35 days. It's been years since I've done it, but you gotta like lamb. I mean, you have to like lamb because the intensity was intense. But it was really good. It was really good. It was good.
It wasn't
Okay.
cooked.
No, not at all. It was not cooked. In fact, I'll try to find the link. It's been freaking years. So
Well, if you find it, send it to me, and I'll put it in the description of the
I'll do.
podcast so
I'll
people
do
can
it right
actually
now.
find it. But so yeah, I mean, I actually when I was
Sure.
looking at on Umai Dry's YouTube channel, they actually have some videos on dry aged lamb, and I haven't tried it. So I guess you can do it. I don't
I just
know.
found it. It's been 6 years.
Yeah.
I'll
Well,
send it to
just
you right
send
now.
it to me, and I'll put it in the link in the description below so people can do it. But so yeah, there's other things people can dry age. I mean, and that's just like we were talking about with beef. You got to make sure it's a big enough piece. You're gonna lose moisture, so that you send it to where you're using something that's going to allow for that. You're going to lose some of the moisture, and so you got to have a big enough piece. So you don't want to do like lamb chops or anything like that. You got to do the whole primal type of that as well. So let's talk about charcuterie,
I've done a lot of that.
which is dry aging, but there's also some other things involved like curing and all that. So since you're the big charcuterie person, Lloyd, I know you've done a lot of
Oh yeah, a lot.
making salamis and stuff like that. How much different is that than dry aging?
You still have to have a controlled environment to pull it off. So let's talk whole muscles, which would be likened to doing a whole primal. So when you're going to cure a whole muscle, let's say beef tenderloin. There's a good example. I did one. It was an Italian one. That was amazing. You only need salt, but I prefer using cure number 2. Prairie powder number 2, which is a nitrite and nitrate combination that allows for time release. So the nitrates turn into nitrites, and it takes a very, very, very long time. But again, you got to control the moisture, the temperature, and the environment. And that's where I use the umami bags also for that. And it works great.
Yeah, I know they have some that are specifically sized for charcuterie, and they have
Yes,
videos
they
and
work great.
instructions on how to do
But
it. And in case people don't know what charcuterie is, because I know it's a fancy French word, but it's usually, you know, salamis, pepperonis, prosciutto, you know, things like that, that you're gonna, you know, cut up into like a cheese board. Or I think the definition of charcuterie is deli, right? Isn't it? I think
no, I
that's,
think God, I don't think so. Uh, Google
but
it. I don't know.
I
I
think it
forgot.
was. I think I looked it up, and
I
that's
don't
kind of
know.
what it
I'm gonna look
means.
it up right now.
It's
But
all those, you know, sausages you see hanging from the ceiling, and
yeah,
hams and
there's the
things like that,
definition.
where they're not
It
just dry
does. I'm looking it
aged.
up. Charcuterie. It
Yeah,
says delicatessen. French,
yeah.
English is delicatessen.
So
So,
yeah, it's that stuff that we normally see hanging from a, you know, you go into an Italian meat market or something, you see all that stuff hanging, and it's, you got hams and
so,
sausages and
so I do want to touch on one thing. So with whole muscles, whether it's a ribeye or pork, whatever, you really don't technically need to use curing salts, nitrites, or nitrates. Okay, you don't, because it's a whole muscle, because the interior of the meat is sterile. Okay. However, when it comes to beef, the advantage of using Prague powder number 2 or cure number 2 is that beef fat tends to go rancid. So if you make it a bresaola from the eye of round, you got to cut off all the fat. You could just use salt. But if you got to cut like a ribeye, and I've done ribeyes, I've done tenderloins, I've done whole primal ribeyes, and I've done the whole thing. You got to use cure number 2 because the nitrites and nitrates will prevent the rancidity. In pork, you don't have an issue. You could do a whole ham with just salt and get great results. You don't need the curing salts. When it comes to sausages, of course, you need the curing salts.
gotcha. So, you know, what kind of process do you normally go through when you're making charcuterie? Do you normally like grind? You know, you start with just
Or,
chunks of
or,
meat,
are
grind
we
it up,
talking
and
like whole muscle or like sausages?
well, like sausages. Let's do like, you know, a salami and a or pepperoni or something like that.
Well, okay, so if I'm doing a pepperoni, let's see. I usually introduce a bacterium also to it, which is not a requirement, but it kind of speeds up the process. But while my grind usually is I'll cut all the meat up, I'll put all the spices in it, and then I grind. I think I get a better result. You don't have to use a bacterium, but the bacterium helps lower the pH down to a proper percentage to avoid the bad, nasty bacteria that could just uh, damage your product. It'll just mold and nasty. It'll just go bad.
Do you introduce lactobacillus?
It's a form of lactobacillus. It's a bacterium 600, I believe, but it's a form of lactobacillus. Yes, it's basically to hyper speed the pH down below 4.2.
And it
That's
gives
what
you
it
a
does.
flavor. It has a nice
Oh
flavor
gosh,
too. That
there's a
tanginess.
yes, tang.
Yeah.
So if you go to old country like Europe, before there was bacteriums, it was kind of hit and miss. Some people got sick, some people didn't get sick. It really is. So what they would do is just throw salt, and there's bacteria in the air, and sometimes the meat would get contaminated with the good bacteria, and you end up with a good product. And then sometimes you cut into it, it's all green and nasty. So it really was hit and miss, where the bacterium gives you consistent results. So the goal is to make it safe to eat, you got to get the AW water percentage below 85, 0.85. That's where nothing will grow. The bad mold won't grow. Botulism will not grow. So the introducing a bacterium to it takes the pH below 4.2 within a matter of just a couple of days. And then you can start the drying process. But if you don't use the bacterium, you know, the time it hits 0.85 for water activity, you could have rotten meat already.
Yeah.
So I use bacterium.
So how long do you normally have to do something like that before you start the drying process?
So it depends on the meat. So for sausages, you only need, 24 to 72 hours. That's it. So you've introduced the The bacterium, you've introduced prey powder number 2, talking dry curing now, okay? Within 3 days, you know, you've actually ground up all your meat, you put them all in the casings, you hung them outside to bloom and for the bacterium to create. So you need an environment of like 71 to 75 degrees, okay? After you hit those temperatures, right, you can tell by the color, and you can actually test the pH. Once it's below 4.2, I believe, then you can start the drying process. You gotta, you know, if you're not doing it in the umami bags, you gotta put it in a special controlled environment. And usually it's at very high percentages, like 85, 90%. And then as the product starts to lose weight, you start notching down the humidity. Because if you don't start out with a high humidity, you get a thing called case hardening. You guys familiar with case hardening? You are, Kevin, right? Case hardening?
Yeah.
That's where the outside gets hard, inside is mushy, and no moisture escapes. And you end up with bad mold. So with traditional dry curing, you're starting out with a very, very high percentage of humidity inside your controlled environment, you know, with humidity, fans, salt, you've got all kinds of Lysol in there, and you're notching the humidity down until the final product reaches a 25 to 30% weight loss, which gives you a safe product to eat. Your umami bags are simple though. You just put it in the damn bag and leave it alone and wait to hit the target weight and you're done.
Well, that was too. When I was looking at some of their, you know, with my bags, they have a whole charcuterie kits. They even have like some spice blends and stuff, and they walk you through the whole process so people can not feel, you know, because I know stuff like that can people start, you know, their eyes start crossing, but it's really easy once you start looking at it. And if you buy something like this that kind of walks you through it and gives you the ability to do it without having special equipment, it's kind of like what you said though, Lloyd, back in 100 years ago.
Oh yeah.
That's what they did. I mean, this is how they preserved meat, you know, without any science behind it. They just, you know, that's how their grandpa and great grandpa, this is how they, you know, did it. They mixed up these spices and threw it in the casing and hung it over and they prayed. And they prayed that it didn't kill them.
What they didn't know, so if you think about the salts back then, a lot of natural salts back then that were not overly processed had natural nitrites in it too. So they were actually preserving the meat with nitrites and didn't know it.
Right.
I just sent you a link, Darren, to my blog, and I have a lot of umami things I've done, a lot. From duck salami, duck sausage, to prosciutto, to sausages. I've done it all. So
those bags work pretty well.
Yeah, I'll definitely put the link to that as well. But
done a lot of bacons too. Only need sodium nitrites though for bacon.
Yeah, there's so many things you can do with it, and I'm kind of surprised. You know, I think I'm going to do more since I'm getting this whole cow, and I've got pork belly and stuff in there that I can do, you know, and it's easy to buy that stuff now. If you know, I know Costco usually carries pork belly, and they usually carry skinless pork belly, which is a lot better to make, you know, bacon and stuff from than some of the other stuff. So, I mean, I think I'm going to start playing around making some of my own salamis and stuff like that. It just seems like it's something cool to do, and not everybody does, and it's just something you know that you can actually be proud of. You made something. So,
I would start out with bacons. Bacons are so much easy to do. You're just taking, you know, either 0.19 or 0.25% of cure number 1. You're mixing it with your salt and your sugars and your coating, and then of course you can add sugars to it, of course. But it's so easy to do. So easy to do.
And I've made plenty of, you know, regular sausages. I just never gone that extra step to doing the curing and all that, you know, where to get into the salamis. But I've made plenty of bratwursts and summer sausage and you know, smoked sausage, Italian sausage, stuff like that. I love them. I got a meat grinder. I love to open it up every once in a while and just buy. I'll buy, you know, you don't do this, but you get 99-cent pork butts all the time, you know, a lot. And I'll go and buy 4 or 5 of them and just stick them in the freezer and then thaw them out and make sausage out of them. So,
and pork butts, you know, although I don't eat it, it's got the perfect fat ratio. Yeah, it's perfect. It's perfect. Yeah. It really is the perfect
30%.
Yeah, it's the perfect vessel for just about everything, except for Jews.
Well, and that's one of the things why, I kind of wish I could find more domestic lamb, because I'd like to do some more with making, mixing, ground lamb with ground beef and making more like the gyros and that kind of
Done
stuff,
that.
Yeah.
I've done that too.
So
I found a farm near me that has lamb for sale. I
cool.
contacted them last week.
Oh, nice.
They're 10 miles away.
Awesome.
That's great.
All right, guys. So what else can we dry age? Are we going to talk about dry aging chicken? I don't think so.
Did you guys
I
want to
saw
talk
someone dry age salmon.
Really? Talk about that.
They said it was wonderful. There's a video on YouTube, a guy who does a lot of different stuff, and I totally expected it to just be terrible. And he did it in the umami bag, and he trimmed all the desiccated stuff off of it and fried it up, and he said it was unbelievable.
No, I guess if you use those
I'm
bags,
just amazed. I thought it would be rotten.
You could dry age a lot of different things using those bags, and as long as you're not losing, like, that would be my fear, is if, how thick is the salmon, because, you're going to lose, how much of it did he lose? A quarter to a half of it. Yeah. So that gets to a point where
easily,
it gets to a point where you're paying for 5 pounds of salmon. Now it's 2.5 pounds, and now it's twice as much as what you paid for it.
You had to use a king or something, right? With a huge, it had to be a king salmon.
it looked like Atlantic to me, but
okay.
I don't know what he used.
Well, and I guess it depends on how long you age it as well. I mean, if you age it, 15 days, it's not going to be as bad as if it was 30 or 45 days. So
he did 21 days.
Yeah.
I think he did 21.
Wow. Something.
But it's something that people can play around with, and these bags and stuff like, that makes it easier for people to experiment, as long as they're safe and not,
Oh yeah.
That's one of the things when you're dry aging or wet aging. You got to do it in a refrigerator that keeps it below 41 degrees. That's for sure. So you can't have a refrigerator sitting out in the garage that's, going over 40 degrees all the time, because and I know I actually had a refrigerator out in my garage a couple of years ago that I couldn't get it under 42 degrees because it was an older one, and I wouldn't put anything in it that, it was just used for drinks. So
I was going to say soda.
Sodas and beer was it. But, I really wouldn't put any other kind of meat in it. So you got to make sure that if you're going to use a refrigerator for these bags, that it can be under 41 degrees, preferably 35 to 37 degrees, I think, is where the sweet spot is.
If you're going to do it, I'd get one of those things on Amazon that monitor your temperature and your humidity. They're like $30, and you hook it up to your phone. You can monitor it from anywhere. It hooks up to the internet.
Yeah,
they're cheap.
A couple articles that talk about aging meat inside your refrigerator, the whole primals, and I've never done it, but basically putting a pan of water in there, lots of salt in there, elevated your protein on a rack, and you can age. I've never done it. I've heard people gotten really good results.
Yeah, and like I said, the only thing you got to look out for is what other stuff you have in the refrigerator, because it takes on some of that stuff. So if you got like a bunch of onions or vegetables and stuff in there,
I have buddies that will put blue cheese. They'll surround their protein with different types of cheeses in there.
Well, they're also looking to get some of that mold and stuff to attach to it as well. So,
did you want to talk about faux aging with fish sauce and sauce?
Yeah, let's talk about that, because that's another thing that we're not going to go too deep into it, because we had talked about this before, and we can send them to your website. But faux aging is a thing that people use, and especially they use it with sous vide, where they actually will take another element like fish sauce or koji rice that has a certain fungus in it. So let's talk about that, Lloyd, because you've done a lot of that stuff.
So, I have not done the koji rice yet, although I've got the product and I've been wanting to do it. I've had the time. So faux aging. So I first read about faux aging with fish sauce on the e-gullet forums, and I'm following Baldwin and Nathan. I can't pronounce his last name. Myfold. How do you pronounce it? Myfold?
Mirvold, I think. I don't know. I've never heard it pronounced.
So it's Monocuisine. So you see all these these guys speak freely. So you got Nathan, you got Baldwin, you have all these professional chefs that do a lot of experimenting. What they put in their books is not what they're doing in these farms. And that's where I first heard about it. And then Modern Cuisine wrote in Bon Appetit, or one of those magazines in 2013, on how to faux age meat. So I didn't come up with it. I'm just copying these guys. E. Gillett forums in the 2000s, 2013. And but I'm taking it a little step further. I use either fish salt by a company called Red Boat or Red Boat fish sauce. And I like between, for fish sauce, 1.75% to 2.25% based on the protein's weight. So if you got a steak and you're using fish salt, the steak weighs 1,000 grams. I'm using 1%, which is 10 grams, not a lot. Smear it on the steak, vacuum seal it, give it 3 days, and you're ready to go. And it will not impart any kind of fishy flavor, because if you smell the product, it's very fishy, of course. But what it does is it does a couple different things. It kind of mimics the dry aging process to a point. The salts inside the fish sauce or salt will denature the protein strands and make it more tender. It will give it umami, the glutamates, and it's a thing called, I got the word right here, called a nucleotide. There's a compound inside between the glutamates, the glutamic acid, and the nucleotides that gives it that kind of funk and the umami flavor. But you need 3 days. It's not like dry brine. You put some salt on a steak or a chicken. The next day you can cook it. You need 3 days for the glutamates to penetrate the protein. And I like fish salt because the application is much easier to do. But it's amazing. We're talking about umami, bust a beef flavor in your mouth. It's amazing. I don't suggest using regular fish sauce, but elevate your game to Red Boat. And I've tested all 5 of their products, and Red Boat's amazing. And I have a blog. I'll send you the link, Darren.
I love their stuff.
Yeah,
Oh, love Red Boat.
I'll put a link to some of your articles in the description too, because
That's amazing.
I've done the fish just using fish sauce, the Red Boat fish sauce.
Mm-hmm.
I've done that faux aging. I think I did a week on it on some steaks, but I also did. I used the koji rice and I mixed it with the fish sauce as well. So it actually, both of those turned out pretty well. The koji, I want to say came out maybe just a little bit different, but I don't think, because koji rice is kind of expensive. I mean, it was like 17, 18 bucks off of Amazon for one little pack, and it got me, where I could do maybe 6 steaks with it. And I don't think it really added much to what I could have got just with the fish sauce. So
I know it's a different flavor. I got some friends that do it.
Koji rice is a different thing. Most people aren't using it properly. There's a guy in Ohio named Jeremy Umansky who's, if you look, he has a YouTube video. Just Google, put it in YouTube. He has a book out a few months. It's been out a couple months, and he's the king of koji. This guy knows what's going on, and his book is about koji.
Wait, I think I got it. Wait. I got a book right here. Wait, let me find it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Got the guy right here. Can you see it?
Nope. There it
around. Is.
There you go.
I got the book.
Yep. Yeah. He's the king.
And I have not read it yet. I haven't even opened. Wait, I'm opening it. Okay.
He knows. Yeah, he knows his stuff.
So, but I understand. So the koji will actually dehydrate the protein, which is more likened to dry aging, and give a different funk than, let's say, fish sauce. All 3 flavors different. My buddy did a fish sauce, he did a dry aging, and he did the koji. He said all 3 were great, but each one had a unique flavor to it.
Yeah. Like I said, the one I did, I actually mixed fish sauce and the koji together because I saw that was something that, somebody said, well, this is the best because it mixes both of them together. And, and I only had to, be able to compare it to just the fish sauce itself. And I don't know, maybe my palate's not as big. I just really didn't taste much of a difference in it. And actually my kids and my wife didn't really care for it. So
okay. With koji, though, I've read, haven't done it. You can actually speed up the curing process too, in the dry aging.
Yeah.
I haven't done that yet.
I actually only did it for, I think it's a lot shorter process than just using the fish sauce. So, from what I did it anyway, from what I
But people use
found
it
and what I
for
did
dry
it.
curing.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we touched on just about everything we could talk about on aging and faux aging.
I did want to say one last thing, and this is to some
Do
of
you
your
really?
viewers. Well,
Okay,
this is a
go
little
ahead.
pet peeve of mine. And I think Kevin probably knows where I'm going with this.
Oh, I
Uh,
know exactly where you're going.
so with dry aged meat, and I'm not going to say who started this. I'm trying to find. I wrote an article on it here, and
I
you
didn't
guys.
start it. Did I start it? I can edit this, right?
Oh, oh, cool. So people would like to equate. Can you still see me? I lost my freaking screen here.
Yes, I can see you.
All right. So people like to equate the
I can
outer
see it.
layer. There we go. People like to equate the outer layer of dry aged meat with a pellicle. That's a bunch of bull. It's not a pellicle. Okay, it's a misnomer, and some chef came up with that term for it, and thousands of people were starting to use it. A pellicle is different than what's on the outer layer of a dry aged steak. We're talking dry aged meat is desecrated. It's autolysis. It's rotten meat on the outside.
Right.
There's bacteria.
It's
It's not
It's
a
desiccated.
pellicle is a growth, right? It's something
It
that
is. In
actually,
fact,
yeah.
I looked up the word. It's called protoza.
It's
an
a
actual
protein.
It's a small, thin membrane made up of protoza, which is used usually for smoked meats. So it's not a pellicle, people. If you're listening, okay, quit calling the outside of that freaking mahogany glaze a pellicle. It's not.
So just say
Yeah,
you're gonna scrape off the rotten part.
Yeah, the desecrated meat, like Kevin just said, it's
I
rotten meat.
always, before I smoke salmon for gravlax and stuff, I always let it sit out for hours
Absolutely.
or a day, and then it develops that sticky
Yeah,
protein matrix on the outside,
protoza.
and smoke grabs onto it like it's
Yeah.
no tomorrow.
I do my bacons that way too. I'll buy beef bellies. I'll do the same thing. I'll rinse all the crap off, put it in the refrigerator, air circulation, and I'll develop that little tacky stuff on it so all the smoke attaches to it.
I bought beef bacon for the first time yesterday, Lloyd. It was unbelievable.
Oh, you liked it?
I
Good.
it was excellent. I bought it. I was thinking of you. I was like, well, Lloyd loves this stuff. I better try it. And I bought a pack, and it was wonderful.
Oh,
I had
good.
some last
Good.
night.
What was the company? Do you recall the company?
It's a Pennsylvania company. I can't remember offhand right now.
Okay.
It's in the fridge. I'm not going to get it. I'll tell you later.
Tell me later.
Well, all right, guys. I want to thank you for joining me, and this has been great. And I hope people get something out of it. Make sure you guys check out Lloyd's blog, The Kosher Dosher. Check out Kevin has a great Facebook group called Sous Vide Food and Fun. You can check them out there. And I'm also in that group, and you can also check out. They're both in my group and the Fire and Water Cooking Facebook group, Sous Vide Barbecue, Fire and Water Cooking. So check that out as well. And you can find this podcast on also my Facebook page and on YouTube, besides just being on an audio podcast now. So thanks, guys, for joining me. When we'll do this again, we'll come up with some other subjects that we can sit here and talk about for an hour. People have to listen to us.
Thank you. I hope I get my internet fixed.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks for following the Fire and Water Cooking podcast. And I will see you on the next podcast. Well, thanks again for joining us, guys. I want to thank Kevin and Lloyd again for being on. Make sure you check out Umami Dry. They make it really easy for you to age and make charcuterie at home. Check them out in the description below. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and make sure you join us again on the next Fire and Water Cooking podcast.